Hello, friends. I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? I hope everything is great and wonderful. Everything here is fantastic. I have another interesting mix of things here with me today that I will tie together at some point. Um, and it relates to the game that I've been working on. It relates to a game that I've been playing on my Switch, and it relates to just kind of creation and art as a whole. Recently, I watched a Twitch stream from Patrick Rothfuss. If you don't know who that is, he is an author, and he wrote The Name of the Wind. It's a series that maybe someday will be a trilogy. And he's a very well-spoken person, very, very good writer. And he has interesting thoughts. So he goes on Twitch, and he does these live streams where he takes people's questions and answers. And a question that he received was from a person who said they wanted to write a book, but they don't really read. Should they read books? Like, should they read books first, or should they start writing? And his answer was read. Like, you can't write a book unless you know how books are written. And I kind of paused and thought about that for a little while. He articulated on it some more, and it's, made some good points about the expectation of art. And really made me stop and kind of think about things that I've been doing recently as far as this game goes. And in fact, as far as the game that I've been playing on my Switch. And how everything that we do, there are expectations tied to it, right? Like when you listen to a song, there's an expectation of how that song works. There's an expectation of an opening. There's an expectation of a build, and then a climax, and then an ending to the song, and all of those things tie together to make a complete song, and that is the expectation of the listener. Are you free to make music however the hell you feel like it? Sure, but if you don't meet the basic expectations of your audience, then maybe whatever it is you created is so unique and so different. That it doesn't necessarily have a market, that it doesn't have a niche yet, and maybe it will someday. Maybe you do create something unique, So, but the whole point of this is that you can't create something that is marketable or is approachable without meeting certain expectations. And every type of creative endeavor has its own set of rules or its own set of expectations. And the part that makes your creation yours is being able to take those expectations and maybe turn them a little bit. Maybe rotate them, 10 degrees. Or maybe you take one of those expectations and you completely twist it around and you throw it back and you can build on that. And then maybe you can take a large portion of it and really paint it with your own style and make it so fresh and unique that it feels like something new, even though it isn't. And that's the magic of creation. And part of it, that's what I've been going through with this game that I've been working on. The game that I've been working on started 6 years ago with the premise of, can I build a route building game like Ticket to Ride, where the routes are randomized and the routes aren't individualized. So it's not me building a route, it's you and me. Like, it's any number of players putting pieces on this route. And that's where I started. And so I took that expectation and I twisted it just a little bit. And when I played it, what I found was that wasn't interesting enough, right? It was basically Ticket to Ride with a couple of odd quirks that didn't really add to the gameplay. And so then I started adding more elements. I decided, okay, well, what else can I bring to the table? Well, if we're both building on these things, instead of one person building a route, there's two people or three people, what can I do with that to make the game more interesting? And I said, I can add an element where if I control the most portions of that route, then maybe I get a bonus. And so I added in this little side currency that helps you upgrade other things, and then that started to work. And eventually I massaged it into a playable game that people liked. And now I'm taking it even further, and I'm adding a whole separate kind of side game, a whole separate decision tree to kind of broaden the whole, to flesh it all out. Because even with the little side currency, the game still felt like a weird Ticket to Ride that didn't really have a place in the world. And I think that adding a little side mechanism works. I think it really opens up the decision tree to mean I can attack goals early on, or I can work on the board early on and go for goals later. And there's a balance between the players deciding what they're going to do, when they're going to do it, and how they're going to do it. Meaning that some of the stuff that I've added gives you kind of special powers, or gives you special scoring bonuses that maybe other players don't have access to. And so I worked on this, and I play tested it at lunch, and I sat down and I drew up a first draft. And my friend came over last night, and I showed him this, and he quickly pointed out, like, well, what if you do this and this doesn't? And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's completely broken. It doesn't work at all, does it? And so, again, this is one of those instances where I've played hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of games. Literally, probably, I'm not going to say 1,000. I've played hundreds of different games in my life. Board games, specifically board games. Hundreds and hundreds of board games. And that gives me a perspective to know what the expectations are when I say I'm building a route building game. That automatically plugs a little bit of an expectation into your mind. I'm going to try to start somewhere, and I'm going to branch, and I'm going to make connections to other places, and maybe I'm going to make deliveries or whatever. And then I take that and I flip it around and go, nope, that's not what it's about at all. Those routes are just a means to gather resources, and then those resources are the means to play the rest of the game, which is what this is now. And because that's not really within the scope of the expectation of any type of game style that's currently out there, it feels a little bit off. And I think it still does. Like, there's nothing magical in this game. There's nothing special about it. There's no secret sauce that goes, oh, this takes, this adds this new thing that's just going to blow your mind. It doesn't do any of that. It takes a bunch of little pieces of other things and pushes them all into a nice little package and goes, I think this is an interesting experience. Hopefully you'll come along for the ride, right? And yet, in adding this little side mechanism, I made it so much more removed from expectation that it just kind of fell apart really quickly. And I didn't see it because I was stuck inside my own art. And that can be difficult, and that's why having smart friends around is really important. This all relates to the Switch because I'm also playing a game right now called Earthlock, which I've had on my wish list for a while. It was on sale a few months back, and I picked it up. And it's a game that was developed in Norway, I think, somewhere like that. And I think the Norwegian Film Institute funded it. And it's a neat little role-playing game, but the experience of playing this game is very much like playing a role-playing game that from a developer who's never played a role-playing game. They added a bunch of little mechanics to this game to try to make it different, and in most cases, the little mechanics don't add anything interesting. They just make it more tedious. And a lot of it, like even just the UI and the way that you interact with characters, with dialogue, it's really strange. It feels really wrong. It doesn't feel like any other game you've ever played. You don't hit the same buttons. You don't do the same things. And on top of that, they added in little mechanics that are just kind of bafflingly like, what's the point of that? For instance, there's farming in the game. There's farming in every game now, right? Like that's a requirement. But farming in this game is you put a seed in a seed plot, and then you have to water that seed. And there's a little slider bar, and you have to get the water to a certain level for that seed to grow. Okay. It's not difficult. It's not a game of skill. You just hit the button a few times, it fills up, and then you're done. And when the seed hatches, like about 10 seconds later, you have to refill that bar again. And it's just cumbersome and weird. Like, what's the point of it? It's not like you're going to accidentally, overwater the plant or underwater and nothing's going to happen. Like, it's really easy to do this thing. It's so simple that it's just completely takes away from the rest of the game. Like, why am I doing this? What is the point of this little water thing? It means absolutely nothing. And I think that when I looked at some of the things that I tried to add to my game, I realized that some of them don't have a point. They're just like cool little things. and they're cool little additions. I thought in my head, like, this is a cool little addition, but in reality, when you sit down to play it as a player, you're like, why is this like this? This is just not what is expected. And I think sometimes, as much as creatives try to stretch their wings and find that voice that is their own, or find that corner that they can call their own and say, this is my creation, sometimes those creations are not really good enough. And sometimes you have to be willing to just go, and throw it away. And so that's what I had to do today. I threw away all of my assumptions that I made the first attempt at this, and I made second attempt. And I've got to play test it a little bit with myself, and I'm much more happy. I still think that playtesting is going to find a whole lot of flaws with this, but I think that I now have a package that is a game that is playable, that is interesting, that has good decisions. It's just not special, right? And so it's probably not marketable, but I don't care. I'm going to continue making it, and I will probably do some sort of super duper limited release or something like that. We'll see. I don't really know that I have a question for you today. I just wanted to share my thoughts on trying to be unique and trying to create something without perspective. It's a very difficult thing to do. So thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really appreciate you. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know to sound smart is gallivant. It is a verb meaning to wander widely, to constantly travel to many different places without an itinerary or plan, to freely go wherever and whenever the mood strikes you, and doing so frequently. Some accuse us of gallivanting around the world, but cultural knowledge is de rigueur for cocktail conversation. Gallivant. Gallivant. That one threw me for a loop. I don't pre-read these. I don't practice. I just look down and read, and de rigueur? I don't even know if I said that correctly. No clue what that is.